First of all, thank you all for attending this conference. I hope to get a lot of useful feedback. What I would like to talk to you about today is a empirical study we conducted about the role of sector-based stereotypes in applicant attraction, and more specifically the role of psychological distance in this relationship. So I said earlier, sector-based stereotypes. Now, stereotypes always speak to the imagination. And when we look at some examples from the media, we can see that even organizations suffer from those stereotypes. For example, the pharmaceutical sector has received hard hits in the past couple of years by Michael Moore, amongst others. And what is actually the perception of the pharmaceutical sector right now is that they're not very ethical, they're not transparent about their methods, and so on. So this perception is very strong to the extent that it's almost impossible to make a distinction between the perception of an individual organization within that sector and the sector itself. And this shows that the characteristics of a certain sector, the characteristics that people attribute to a certain sector, they influence the perception of individual organizations. So it will also influence the perception of job seekers, obviously. And this is not surprising if we take the point of view of a job seeker. What a job seeker wants to know when he's browsing job advertisements is the organization that I have in front of me, will it be able to fulfill my psychological needs? Will I be able to communicate and trust my colleagues? So in short, will there be a person-organization fit with that organization? However, it is not possible for job seekers to directly experience that organization. So the solution to this is they construe a mental image of that organization. They try to anticipate what will it be like in that organization. But as we saw earlier, and as has been proven by Professor Van Viana and colleagues, is that when people construe that mental image, they are influenced by what they think is typical for the category in which the organization is active. So when they think about what will it be like in the organization, they also activate the thought that the organization is part of a group of organizations. And the membership of that group triggers assumptions. So what we have actually is a stereotypical image of the organization. And what we tried to scrutinize in this study is, well, is the influence of those stereotypes always that strong? And our theoretical basis for this is Construal level theory. Construal level theory actually says that whenever a mental image of an object is construed, it is always influenced by the psychological distance towards that object. And psychological distance actually means the feeling of being far away from something in terms of time, space, social distance, and hypotheticality. For example, if we apply this to an organization, entering the organization might be tomorrow, which is a small psychological distance, or it might be next month, which is a larger psychological distance. Similarly, the organization might be just around the corner, or it might be half a world away. So it's really the feeling of I am far away from that organization, or I am closer to that organization. And that feeling might moderate the effect of the stereotypical image of the organization, because you can see here at a large psychological distance, people are going to construe the image in very abstract terms, which are relatively stable. And one example of this is category membership. When the psychological distance is smaller, people construe their mental image of something in more concrete terms, more context-specific terms, and these are, for example, distinguishing features. And this is actually because, say for example, you would construe a mental image in a large psychological distance in very concrete terms, and the object becomes psychologically closer. If you should use concrete terms, the image might be wrong, because they are so context specific. Abstract terms, relatively stable, they will ensure that the object is more constant and that the plans you make based on that mental image will not have to change. So, for example, in a large psychological distance, the mental image of an organization might be organization is a non-profit, and in a small psychological distance, you might use more concrete information to construe your mental image, and that could be, for example, a high salary. This organization provides me with a company car, etc. So what this means is category-based assumptions. They will influence the image of the organization more strongly at a large psychological distance compared to a small psychological distance. Simply because the category is constant, and in a large psychological distance, this would be used to construe a mental image. So this leads to our hypotheses. The subjective fit with organizational values resembles the subjective fit with sector values more closely when psychological distance is large compared to when psychological distance is small. So this actually means that the organizational values are resemble the sector values to a very large extent. So that would prove the influence of the sector perceptions. And hypothesis 2, the subjective fit with the sector predicts attraction towards the organization more when the psychological distance is large compared to when the psychological distance is small, because people then shift to more distinguishing features, more concrete features. So how did we study this? We conducted a vignette study. The samples were students in their first year of college and in their last year of college, which is actually the operationalization of psychological distance. Students in their first year of college are still far away from applying, so they are in a large psychological distance. And students in their last year are obviously much more close to applying for a job, so their psychological distance will be smaller. We used atypical organizations for this because that way you're able to distinguish the sector values and the reported organizational values. So it's actually a bank who cares a lot about social relationships between colleagues, and there was also something about learning opportunities in there. And then you have a care facility which was very much focused on making profit, etc. Okay, so the measures we used were personal values, organizational value perceptions, and sector value perceptions, all commensurate values. Value questionnaires, they were based on a self-determination theme. Then we measured the attractiveness of the organization, and as a sort of a check whether the psychological distance is indeed larger in the first year students compared to the last year students, we also added a measure of perception of psychological distance. And then the fit estimations were for the subjective fit, the correlation between personal values and organizational value perceptions. And for subjective person sector fit or person industry fit, we used the correlation of personal values and sector value perception. So those were within person correlations actually between the value profiles. Our results for hypothesis 1, which stated that the subjective fit with the organizational values resembles the subjective fit with sector values more closely in a large psychological distance. We actually we correlated the person organization fit and person sector fit in the first year students and in the last year students. And there we can see that the correlation is much higher in first year students, so at a large psychological distance, compared to the last year students in a small psychological distance. And this difference was indeed significant. So we consider hypothesis 1 confirmed. Hypothesis 2 stated that the subjective fit between personal values and sector values predicted attraction in the large psychological distance. And we used a hierarchical regression for that. Here we can see that there is a significant interaction effect between person sector fit and year of study on the attractiveness of the organization. We looked into that in more detail, and simple slope analysis did indeed reveal that there was a significant effect of person sector fit on attraction in the first year students, but not in the last year students. So in a large psychological distance, but not at a small psychological distance. So we consider hypothesis 2 confirmed as well. So our conclusions were organizational stereotypes are especially potent in case of a large psychological distance. The contamination of subjective person-organization fit and attractiveness of the organization is there in the large psychological distance, even when information to the contrary is available. So those are the atypical organizations, which did state their individual, the values of their individual organization, but those were not processed as the sector values were used to try to see if the job seeker would fit. And when psychological distance becomes smaller, the distinguishing features become more salient. So the implication is the influence of stereotypes of large psychological distance are that information to break those stereotypes should also be high level. Because we saw at the low level, which were provided in the vignette study, those did not have any effects. which is completely understandable from a construal level theory perspective. But if that information, that counter-stereotypical information, would be also high level, also very abstract, that may break the stereotypes. So that's something for a follow-up study. Okay, and that was my presentation. Thank you very much.